Heretic is one of my favorite horror movies of the year. And I'm not just being reactionary here, I waited to see how this settles in my mind. Well, it settled as one of my favorites. Two young Mormon missionaries played by Sophie Thatcher and Chloe East knock on the wrong door. They are greeted by the endlessly charming but actually sinister Mr. Reed, played by Hugh Grant, who traps them in his house and puts their faith to the test. This movie is a great blend of psychological thriller and religious horror, which ends up turning into this twisted game of cat and mouse, and that already is a fun mix of things. But what's even more interesting is that it's not your typical religious horror either. Usually when you think of that subgenre, it either has to do with an exorcism, has to do with the devil or the Antichrist, or revolves around the cult. Heretic is none of these things. It's about something else entirely, which I'm not going to spoil. Hugh Grant in this movie is outstanding. All three of the lead performances are great, but Hugh Grant, iconic. He is even better than I imagined, and I already expect him to be great, but I am loving the roles he has been choosing lately. Seeing him play this scheming villain and pretty much weaponizing his charm was so much fun. And he has played a villain before, but not quite like this one. There's a bit of Jigsaw to him this time around. Now, I'm not saying this movie is like Saw, so don't go there. It's a very different kind of film, but there are some similarities there when it comes to his approach, and there is a challenge element to this story which you can pick up on in the trailer. I can't really imagine anyone else playing this role because Hugh Grant's charisma and how instantly likable he is are the things that make this whole situation believable. You have these two Mormon missionaries, Sister Barnes and Sister Paxton, one of whom is clearly more naive and open, and the other seems more reserved and cautious, but they're both clearly smart young women who aren't just going to walk into a dangerous situation. We don't really dive into their background all that much, but you immediately get a sense of who they are from the way they interact with each other and with others. And yet it makes perfect sense why they end up falling for Mr. Reed's charm and getting lured into the house when you watch it happen. People are not very nice to them, even though they seem like genuinely sweet girls, and it's such a relief for them to finally talk to someone kind and welcoming. Of course they fall for his act, and honestly, who wouldn't? He seems genuine, and there are very few actors as charming as Hugh Grant, and it takes a bit of time for them to realize there is a sinister undertone to all of this. The other reason why Heretic works so well is the writing, and particularly the dialogue. It's actually really impressive how well the dialogue carries this movie because, trust me, Heretic relies on having dialogue that works because there is a lot of it. If the writing wasn't as good as it is, this whole idea would fall apart and become tedious very quickly. A movie that heavily leans into discussing and challenging religious beliefs is not an easy thing to pull off, but here it works, and it relies on the audience paying attention to the details, looking for clues, as well as noticing the nonverbal communication that the cast does so well. And honestly, this really is a very interesting discussion of religion, going into things a lot of movies would deem too controversial to touch. But the way it goes about this doesn't come off as trying to shock or upset people or leave you with some sort of lesson. I really appreciate a movie that sets potent questions in front of you, but doesn't preach the answers. It brings up ideas of the nature of belief, of choice and control, of iterations, which is where it finds a neat way to work music into all of this. And then on top of that, it's darkly funny and entertaining, while also constantly building tension in the background and through all of that dialogue. Heretic seems like a very satisfying film to rewatch. I'm assuming because I've only seen it once, as I'm sure there are more warning signs early on than it initially seems. There are a couple of things I picked up on early, which I'm not going to reveal because I want you to see what you get from it, but as a vague example, there's a quick comment about the walls, which immediately feels odd and is a clear early red flag for the audience. It would also be interesting to observe the details of verbal manipulation because on the first viewing, it's really easy to get caught up in the conversation itself. I'll be honest, I expected this to be entertaining, but not much else beyond that. I thought it would be a one-time watch that's fun, but forgettable outside of Hugh Grant's performance. But the movie gave me a lot more than that. It really stuck with me. I cannot wait to see it again, and I'm really looking forward to discussing it with other people. I do also want to bring up the visuals because this film looks gorgeous and is shot by the cinematographer who worked on stunning looking films like Old Boy, The Handmaiden, Last Night in Soho, It from 2017, and many more. This mostly one location setting of a strange house that seems normal at first is great and very atmospheric. It's definitely the case of the house being a bit of a character on its own. And the way the camera moves through it as you get lured deeper into the house with the two girls changes along with the tone of the film, which is a cool thing to observe. I really don't have much to complain about here, although there are things about the resolution that just left me wishing there was more to it. There is a reveal that happens towards the end of the film, which is something you're waiting for the entire time. A certain development that I wish was explored more. Not necessarily to explain things further, it doesn't leave you confused or anything like that, but at that point, the film raises some new and different questions that it really isn't interested in. But I was. That being said, in its genre, Heretic is one of the best films in recent memory. It just works from beginning to end. It's tightly paced, it's tense, it's atmospheric, it's entertaining, it has great, memorable characters and performances, and when it gets to the actual horror elements, which it does, and they're definitely effective, it doesn't rely on jump scares or loud musical cues. There's so much great tension here and payoff and some surprisingly disturbing visuals. I loved that I had no idea where this movie was going, partly because the marketing kept things pretty vague, but mostly because it's just an unusual story. It was refreshing, it felt original, it felt unpredictable, it was fun. It's also very self-aware when it comes to its influences, but it plays with them, shifting things around, making them fit one way and then another. The storytelling is so sharp here, and it's particularly rewarding if you're paying attention. It's a smart thriller that transforms into a horror film as things effectively go from playful to sinister. It isn't afraid to challenge the viewer's beliefs, and it knows how to entertain its audience. Basically, go watch this. It's a great time. But I'm not going to lie, as a big fan of books, scented candles, and long-winded discussions, I felt a little bit attacked by this movie. Did you?